Hey everyone, this is Who Am I? And today I have Michael Aguilar, who is a principal consultant at SecureWorks and is a expert in medical device hacking. And so, uh, Michael, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And today, one of the first things I want to get right into is that Michael has a couple different things going on at defcon this year. So I wanted to bring those up and ask you a little bit about those because it's obviously really competitive to get a workshop or a talk accepted at defcon, and especially you've got one on this novel topic that I'm interested in. So first I saw that you're on the events list for a defcon workshop right here called Med Team versus Red Team. Do you just want to talk about that a little bit? What that's going to be like?
Sure. Um, again, the Med Team versus Red Team workshop is basically kind of like my theory on medical device hacking and device testing in general with regards to approach and technique. When I started doing device testing on an offensive manner, these devices, or at least the way they were being tested, was very review like. It was almost like implementing STIGs, if you're familiar with DoD
Yeah.
work, where everything was just a checkbox, but not really being dynamically looked at. Now, as I progressed my career, again, I started doing more and more tests and getting more and more involved with different types of testing formats. Doing adversary simulations, standard internal penetration tests and things like that manner. And one thing I noted was that by implementing the skills that I learned on the adversarial simulations, like red team stuff, in these device tests, I was getting further along in my objectives on the things I was trying to test against, as well as creating more impact and getting richer findings for my clients. So this is basically the whole summary of adversarial techniques that I use with regards to device testing.
Okay, great. And so it sounds like there's going to be some information on methodology as well as like TTPs, tools, techniques, procedures type stuff, right? So awesome.
Correct.
And great. So that's going to be at DEF CON this year. That's awesome. Congratulations getting that workshop
Thank you. Thank
accepted.
you.
I think that's going to be great. I bet I don't know if they already open signing up for workshops because it's like it goes quick, right? Like it'll be sold out immediately, right?
I think
So
it lasted about 2 minutes, if that. I looked at my phone, and my friend had sent me a message at the exact time when it kicked off, so it may have gone within like a minute. Uh,
okay,
but yeah,
got it.
it was up and gone.
So you also have this talk going on at the biohacking village. So if people, just heard about the workshop, it's already sold out. They might be able to get into this biohacking talk. So can you tell me a little bit about this talk? Is this a different topic or just kind of condensed? What's this
Sure.
talk?
This is more about my interactions in the past calendar year, as pretty much I do every year, kind of reviewing disclosures that I've gone through with different types of vulnerabilities on medical devices, my interactions with the various heads of state, I guess as it were, uh, that kind of protect the security of these medical devices, namely the FDA and CISA and other aspects of that, and kind of the roadmaps I see for the technologies going forward, and a lot of the pitfalls that have been observed, and some of the promise, but mostly pitfalls, and um, just an overall view of how I feel everything is completely disorganized.
Okay. So I want to dig into that for just a second. Um, so it sounds like you have some channels that you're interacting with, maybe like the FDA or organizations that probably create policy around device security for these devices. Would that be accurate?
Correct. The issue is that, again, with what I'm seeing come out of the FDA corner, it's a lot of guidance, not a rule. So
Ah,
they
I
say
see.
that you
The
should
suggestion.
do this, but you don't have to do this. And
Got
then
it.
as a result, it's only up to the guile of the tester in order to find the flaws to actually unearth these things to show that these things are vulnerable, or again, they'll just get a pass because again, the tester was a weak tester.
Right. Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like DEF CON has been a good stage for you to kind of get this point across, maybe, and hoping to do that again some more. And we'll be digging into you know later kind of more detail around that and where you think the industry's heading and things like that. But I guess before we jump into that, something that we always do here on the show is I always ask the question of how did you get into hacking, and just to uh, go over a little bit again for people is like it's generally less about it's not the question of like how do I get into cybersecurity or how do I get on a red team. um, the people that I bring here are to me hackers, and usually very passionate, and what I like to dig into is like how why right, why hacking, why not something else. So could you tell me a little bit about that background for you?
Oh, easy. I know exactly when I got into hacking. Namely, from background wise, again, I wasn't a terrible child, but I was, always questioning things, which again created, not a subversive attitude, but always questioning things and always, thinking that you could do something better. So you're always asking a lot of questions, and seemingly that drew the ire of a lot of parents. Needless to say, learned how to sneak out of the house, things like that, doing that kind of thing. I always had a computer around me, so that always helped. And then, when Dark Forces came out on the PC and you put it on the CD, my mother added a password because she didn't want me to put that on her work computer. And then obviously you had to learn how to bypass the password in Windows 95 and like XP. So then you go through different methods there. But again, I wasn't really into hacking then. I was in between jobs. I'm trying to remember which jobs I was in between. I think I had just gotten fired from like a Calvin Klein because I didn't let somebody go outside with a very expensive jacket. They happened to know Calvin Klein and got me fired prompt on the spot.
Oh,
But
dang.
I know, right? The odds. But necessarily, I was at home and I was watching the History Channel, like you do. And they had a show on bank security. And it was, I think, 2002. And there were two gentlemen who were talking about this is how you secure a bank. And they're walking around with what was called a net stumbler. And they're using a tool called Backtrack 3. And
Oh,
exactly,
nice.
right? And so I was like, I was watching this History Channel show and I got the principles of it because again, they were trying to look for Wi-Fi to hack. And so I saw them walking around this bank and like, you see the net stumbler and I was like, okay, well that's the thing on the bottom right of your system that shows, what Wi-Fi is there. So it's like just getting the signal. So I understood that primitive. And then I got Backtrack 3, had to understand how to write it to a disk and how to make that bootable, got that booted, and then everybody's Wi-Fi in the area was kind of toast. Uh, and then you just grow up. And I never stopped reading, and it never became. I guess I was never stopped questioning things. So as time progressed, I got behind a computer and was in a technical role, and then realized as an evil sysadmin, you can basically do all the hackery things that I always wanted to do. So then two and two became four, and then you just keep adding on things, and then I became in the field.
Nice. That's funny. So, yeah, Backtrack 3. Yeah, that's awesome. I think they did like 5 versions before they did
Yep.
Cali because I
Oh yeah.
remember like the last Backtrack, I think, uh, before that. I mean, Backtrack was good. It
Dude,
was
so we still had the dragon on it, and like it's all
yeah, it was
red, like
legit.
a black dragon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was like right before the rebrand. Yeah, that's funny. Okay,
It was always
cool.
funny hearing the disk drive heat up, because you're doing something on a live disk because you didn't understand what installing Linux was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, I do think it was probably there's probably a lot of people that their first maybe their first experience with Linux was Backtrack or Kali. Um, you know, something like that. So yeah, there's like a whole bunch to learn before you even really get going, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
you have to learn how to even use this operating system. Um, so yeah, that's one of the many times I guess that that'll keep happening if you keep hacking, right? Is you get excited about something and then realize that like, oh, there's a whole bunch of steps though that I have to go through before
Oh
I
yeah.
get to the idea or the thing that I want to do. There's like a lot of groundwork involved.
It's just like learning a new C2.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah. There's always, I guess, like I said, it's a recurring theme, right? It's like that'll keep happening again and again, and yeah, that's why I always say like keep reading, because that was one of the earliest pieces of advice I got from like a hacker when I was up and coming. I was like, "What do I do?" He was like, "Read." I was like, "Okay," but it's true, right? So okay, cool. So getting back into, so I guess from there, how did you get into medical device hacking? Because that's kind of a niche within hacking. Um, did that arise from just a client need? Somebody said, "Hey, we need you to do this," or did you have some other reason for getting into that?
Well, in my family there was a lot of nurses, not doctors per se, paramedics, things like that. So I was always around the technologies, and I understood the like what was going on. I worked at a hospital as a youth, so I had experience like doing intake for patients. I knew about EHRs when I was younger. I mean, unfortunately, it's like AS400 back then, but I had used it. Uh, but actually, I got started in medical device hacking because a recruiter saw me and was like, "Hey, do you want to come do this?" And I was like, "Yes, it's beats what I was being looking at currently for my job." So I took the offer, and again, I started working for a large manufacturer doing their red team things, and I just actually gotten my OSCP at that time.
Okay, cool. So just kind of an opportunity arose. Somebody decided, like, "Hey, we need somebody who's willing to learn this," and you were willing to learn. It sounds like.
Yeah, it was either that or go to a foreign country for multiple months and then come back, and then go to a foreign country for multiple months and come back. And I said, no, I'm fine.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So when we're talking about these medical devices, um, what what specific kinds of like devices are we talking about? And can you give me some examples that kind of help me understand like what sort of devices in general this fall under this?
Yeah, of course. Again, the devices are broken up into categories. So the devices that I normally test are in the category 2 and category 3 phases. Normally, this has to do with patient care in the duration of patient care and towards the life sustaining portions, and like things like implants or things that will help surgeons in their endeavors in fixing the human body. The class one systems are necessarily simple devices, things like blood pressure cuffs, where there's low risk to the patient for any kind of harm. As you kind of move up in classification areas, again, this starts incorporating things as mentioned to kind of monitor life and also again sustain it and kind of recover it in case there's any kind of issues. But mostly, again, I'm working in the tier 2 and tier 3 sector.
Okay, right, and those being um, potentially like the more impactful to the patient, I guess, or just in could it be part of um, I guess maintaining other life support systems, like if
Yeah,
it's
it's the impact to the patient with regards to patient care. So these
okay.
class 3 ones are ones that would help sustain life. Things like uh, probably implants for your heart, things that will kind of electroshock it, communicate with your phone, send you trajectories and that kind of thing to monitor your life and or aspects of it with regards to health and healthcare.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
So a lot of the simpler ones don't really, because they don't have any kind of moving parts or, it's just like an object, not really a lot of testing with those. But these ones, especially when you start adding networking, start getting sticky pretty quick.
Okay, so these might be, you said critical care. Could that be like life support systems,
Yeah,
scanners that are used to detect, you know, tumors and stuff, like those kinds of like.
various Yeah, various imaging software or
Okay.
types of devices, some surgical robots. Again, these are things that aid surgery to try to, help you, how do you say, get things done in your life. But again, the various types of things, you would be surprised at what they put Wi-Fi on. Some of these things are even just like meant to clean things, and they're not really like that smart, but they just all of a sudden had Wi-Fi.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Um, so thinking about that, I guess what kind of impacts are we talking about? I know obviously with life critical systems, I would guess that the impact could be pretty dramatic. So, can you give me an idea of with those tier one, I guess, devices, like what some of those impacts might be from, what one of your engagements or testing of these things?
Yeah, again, it varies because there's multiple things that are kind of attached to this. There's the network side. So,
Right.
you compromise the device, you do the things, then you can go inward and attack the network. You can pivot through these things. Other
Oh,
times it's the patient data, again, also residing on the same device. So you get the patient data and you get the network. Other times, it's even more than that. It's the patient data, it's the network, and it's the actual patient on the other end, depending on what this thing does. In instances,
right.
again, you can get all three and affect all of those realms, including the patient health.
That's a good point. I don't know why, but I hadn't really been thinking about the impact to the rest of the network when I, you know, thought about what you're working on and reached out to you. I was kind of thinking about just the impact of compromising that one specific device. But as soon as you said it, of course, if these things are networked in, then it could be a great foothold into the network. Like I used to love targeting cameras and different Internet of Things devices back in the days doing pen testing. So that's that's a really interesting point. I hadn't really considered that.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue too, is that again, when you start strapping things onto these devices like Wi-Fi, it just
Yeah.
expands the footprint that can be breached. So it's like, Wi-Fi obviously it's going to be using WPA2, and it's probably going to be using a standard WPA2, not enterprise. If they use
Mm,
enterprise, again, that's up to them to actually set it up. But a lot of people just use the WPA2. You compromise
yeah.
that, then again, you just walk into the network normally. Another
Interesting.
thing is you mentioned this, the locality of the devices. You were thinking again compromising the device locally, which again would
Yeah.
let you to do things local on the device. But also you have to think of the imaging process for mass distribution. A lot of the times with the way that the devices are created, if you compromise that device and fully compromise it, like get the passwords, crack them, or even get hashes of things, um, do you think that password is going to be unique?
Probably not. Would be my
Exactly.
guess in a
So
hospital
encryption
network.
keys, things like this, and it's not even the hospital network. It's just the manufacturer made
Oh, I see.
30,000 of these devices and they shipped them out. Now, a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
times, again, there's various things that can prevent updates and things from getting pushed out. So it's like, you'll either have to go reinstall an operating system or do something to re-image it. So it just expands the footprint of the vulnerabilities. So it's like a simple password compromise may be benign in some types of tests, but then again, you expand this out, then somebody can just walk in and compromise any device normally in the fleet if they can do one.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, reminds me of targeting cameras in that way. Like you could, a lot of them had, like you said, default credentials, or exploit. There were a, some way to exploit some default configuration, right? That's on them all, like from the manufacturer. So that makes a lot of sense now that you've given me that context. So we touched on it a little bit, and I guess we're touching on it a little now with kind of this discussion. But what is your, I guess, assessment of the current security posture of this industry of medical devices that you do testing on, right?
Basically, we're in the same conundrum we are with AI. Everything got released, and then now we're trying to catch up with regulation.
Mm,
So they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle, but unfortunately, the mass consumer market has had a taste of smart things.
right.
So they want everything now and everything networked and everything to get data now and send it to the cloud and keep it cloud stored and have it like use multiple things. So I see the lack of legislation again as a result of that. We're in the same posture with AI. The thing came out before they could actually decide if it was a good idea. Now they're trying to backpedal and add legislation to something that pretty much they can't really control the flow of. They can't stop people from making it. They can't stop people from using it, and they can't stop the creation of further assets in that realm. They can try to limit what it can do, but again, we all know how that goes because as soon as they tried to limit what it does, everybody's just bypassing it anyways, and they're like, okay, well, this is just life. Um, so
Hmm.
with medical devices, it's the same way. We added too many smart things to these things without understanding the complete risk to the patients, the hospital systems, and necessarily sometimes the patients themselves, with regards to bodily health.
Yeah, yeah, and unfortunately, I've seen many uh, ransomware incidents involving hospitals over the last year. I know that a lot of ransomware groups in the past have had policies of not targeting hospitals, and they won't work with affiliates who do, and stuff like that. But obviously, there's always going to be people out there who are willing to target a hospital for a payout, right? There's always going to be those people. So I think this is really important because given that context that you've laid out, now I'm thinking about this as this mass of Internet of Things devices with poor security posture. And if you are part of a ransomware group without certain ethics, then that that seems like a pretty soft target. Um, so
Exactly.
that's
I mean, you have to understand by incorporating these devices, a lot of times, hospital systems, like, you go to a hospital, passwords are like 8 characters. That's why is
yeah,
that? Because, certain systems can't accept passwords greater than 8 characters. And like, they'd have to down level some aspects of security depending on what the device is.
interesting. Okay, so I guess given these challenges, um, obviously you do talks, you do defcon, you are getting this information out there, kind of an awareness um, campaign of sorts. But what, I guess, where can we make progress? Are there companies that are doing, that are trying to do more, trying to do better? Are there is there any optimism within the organizations or the people who are trying to figure out how to regulate or build guidelines? Because I could see where there would be this idea that it's healthcare, and so we have to be careful regulating it, because if we like over regulate, um, that could be a problem. So I guess what, who is anybody like doing, pushing to do better, and is there any optimism on the regulation side?
Some companies take it upon themselves to actually like try. I've worked with a couple of these, and like they're always more than grateful when you find anything, just because again they're trying to implement these things to make everything better.
Yeah.
It's also good when I run into clients and things who like say they stripped out all the Wi-Fi and they're just like, you know what, we're going to do cell because it's harder to clone, and a lot of times the overhead is like not easy for a script kiddie to intercept and things like that. So it's like
Sure.
they're already thinking like in the attack method uh, kind of mindset. Um, Again, some companies are doing well and they're taking it upon themselves. Again, I also know some staff members at the FDA because I actually worked with them in a previous thing in for a medical company, and they are trying to do more. But again, it's all going to come down to a couple things. One is awareness, just for everybody to understand, like these things really bring inherent risk. Because a lot of times when you're doing a device test, it's a singular device. It's not networked into the Active Directory domain like it would be in a standard engagement.
Sure. Right.
So it's like, you compromise one NTLM credential. I've done horrible things with just one low level user getting the whole domain because it's just like, that's how you do things. You abuse certain aspects of it. So whilst, they look at it in the singular, they need to expand the scope of these tests so they actually test against reality. The second thing would be that they need to actually enhance, like, the standards of things. Like, HL7 was developed in like the 80s. It's plain text. It uses no encryption. It offers no encryption. It has no encryption. And I've seen basically nobody use encryption on it. Now, mind you, you can implement secondary encryption like TLS, which would protect patient data like your social security number and what happens in your, medical visit. But since they don't, again, it's just going to get man in the middle, modified on route. And again, sometimes you can even mark the patient dead, which is what we're going to be doing in our lab at the workshop.
Wow, that's really unfortunate but cool.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's funny. It's like, all the patients that we kill in these engagements, that's one to hundreds less that can actually go through the thing if this flaw or whatever gets, realized. So
yeah, yeah. Uh, oh man,
I enjoy I know
I'm
it's
sorry.
hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It gave me a little stumble here. I'm thinking
But
about
that's
marking the
HL7. I
patient
mean,
dead, and so this HL7 is a protocol, I guess, that I don't know anything about it. It's a protocol used in a lot of these devices, then?
yeah, the way that health records are shuttled from backend systems is a lot of times using HL7 messages. Now, the way that it was created was so that everything could be interconnected, so the patient lifecycle could be seamless, depending on not. It doesn't matter where they go, as long as it's created an HL7 message, it can get ingested by another system that uses HL7 and can
Sure.
understand that. So you can see, like, where they are, what vaccines they've had and everything in an effective manner. But again, the problem is that now with everything interconnected and on the interweb, it's just HL7 being sent on the web. Um, Case in point for the workshop that we're giving, like I show a slide that I did on Shodan, a lookup of an HL7 port, and there's just like about I think it was like 50,000 servers that were just chilling in the open with HL7 open. Uh, but what's interesting is you can actually see the HL7 response back. So that means that if you can actually just
Wow.
put up something that can get any kind of traffic going from the origin or the source and get in the middle of that, then you can see things. So it's kind of interesting that those are still kind of just sitting there. But yeah, it's an old protocol. Again, it's older code, but it checks out.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just something that they need to kind of work on and enhance.
Hmm.
It's not going to go away, but the more that we do now, the less we have to do in the future when like things are getting really bad.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like one of those things. It's been implemented on such a scale that we can't just go
Completely.
replace it with some more modern, more robust, messaging system that has like inherently built-in security. That would be great, but not going to happen probably
The
unless
more
it's a
we
very
start
very long
phasing it
time.
out, exactly.
Yeah.
We just need to start slowly phasing it out, implementing better standards, and actually make the better created technologies actual standards versus the you shoulds.
Right, right. So that's the issue of guidelines versus rules and regulations.
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, okay. And you mentioned something I wanted to follow up on at one point. You said that a lot of the testing on these devices is done um, in a silo, essentially. That you test the device, but it's not connected to a network, as an example. Um,
Correct.
have you been invited to do any um, any engagements where these devices are connected into a network, whether that's a mock network or a real, maybe a hospital or something, and they are interested in that impact.
I would say that they are interested in, but I think that I feel that people get more frightened when you start bringing these things up because, again, it's like, when you start showing some of these things, you wonder how it can get sold. I mean, it's very easy. Again, you just, change a couple things. Uh, but I have, with all the tests that I do, I hook up, like, we set up a mock network to make sure that it has some kind of internet connectivity. If it has Wi-Fi, we can attack that, check the controls on that, and how that goes. But again, nobody really has anything interconnected. Now, sometimes, again, depending on what kind of device and where it sends it, you can get access to upstream things, like, IoT hubs and other kinds of things, depending on if there's keys left on the disk. But a lot of times, yeah, nobody's ever really had anything connected in a network environment how it would be in a standard operating room or hospital system.
Hmm. Interesting. So,
But what's interesting, actually, adding on to that, is I've actually done adversarial simulations where I did get onto those devices on the network thing on the other side, and, like, it's like, like, oh, I recognize that brand.
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask next. Was okay. Have you, red teamed a facility that had these devices
Oh, yes,
and
constantly.
leveraged them?
Yeah, all
Okay.
the time. Again, and those are the ones that necessarily I'll see put in OUs, which is kind of funny because I always look for this when I get in those kinds of places. You'll see an OU that says, like, defender disabled.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, that's where they look there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So we've got a lot of different practices going on that is not beneficial for the security posture on these things.
Yeah,
Uh,
again, it's hard to block it, and with just network devices, like, blocking malicious traffic at the network level, because, again, we flip past all the time. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, yeah. There's unfortunately I almost feel like we're in this weird place since you brought up like network detection and we're kind of talking about this impact on networks. I kind of do want to just bring up like maybe you've noticed this, but you know, I feel like we're in this weird place in red team right now in general where something happened where the security vendors, EDR vendors, people who sell various network intrusion, detection prevention systems and stuff, they started paying a lot of attention to the like red team community and kind of the infosec world on places like Twitter and stuff. And it's like if you drop a red team project and it gets enough stars or enough people are paying attention to it, then you know that it's getting picked up by threat intel teams and fed into a mechanism for detection engineering, and they're going to go make signatures for all this stuff. And so then, as a result, of course, red teams stopped publishing things. So they stopped publishing tools, they stopped publishing techniques, and they put some stuff out there still because we like to do it, but a lot of stuff gets held back, and that's been going on for a while now. And now I feel like what's happened is there's this sort of illusion that maybe a lot of these products, endpoint, as well as network intrusion detection products are like working better than they maybe are, because there's not write ups saying they're not, essentially, right? Like we're not like there, and you have to be careful. Like nobody wants to eat. A lot of people don't want to go and also write about bypassing a specific vendor anymore. So there's this like void of that information getting out there, and then it's like when I'm talking to people that I know are um, performing adversary simulations on a regular basis, right? They're not getting stopped by EDR. They're not getting stopped by network detection systems either. Like that's not a problem for them. They've learned how to operate with those things in place, and it's not a problem. So Have you noticed this just in the broader red team space? I mean, what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. Again, it's weird. The thing I've noticed is that there's been a lot of, again, emphasis placed on AI, and everything is the determination factor of what this AI agent says is malicious or not. And there's two issues with that. One, it's, if you're leveraging just AI, then there's an issue because again, you can't just take away the human factor of like a determination of what's malicious. You have to be able to train it in the right things, because if you train it on the wrong things, then it will learn wrong. But it also gets put on the fact that again, this these things are only as good as the data that they get. If you have something misconfigured and you're not getting all the telemetry because you haven't set everything up correctly and you just installed like one thing and you hope that everything's going to fix itself, even with some of these massive, uh, things, the favorites that people use, they're not, if you just put the installer on, it's not going to just like do all the things for you. Like you have to have some level of setup, some level of configuration, understanding of what you actually have in your stead, and then implementation with the correct staff. And a lot of times there's some piece missing that can be fixed, that again, just due to some slip up on their side with the configuration, getting it the wrong data, or not having anybody actually watch it, it leads to a catastrophic outcome.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. That
That and pacing yourself. Don't like just go in there, just start spraying everything. It's an adversary simulation. Do like the adversaries do, and don't play your hand all at once. Do operationally what you need to achieve to be able to keep that foothold, and don't overstep your bounds again to try to cause detections. Metasploit payloads will not necessarily work here.
right, right, right. Yeah. Um yeah, that's a fair point though, that like EDR and these things are like one piece of the puzzle, and that if you're not doing additional configuration and hardening, you don't have the staff who um can do the detection engineering and write custom detections for you that are based on your environment, right? You're not going to get great results. So that is a fair point. Uh, and then yeah, I mean, for what you said about adversary simulation or emulation, I think um, a lot of times, I always think about that. Like, do the I want to as I'm doing offensive operations, I try to think about the my footprint within the network on the device, and every action that I'm doing is expanding that potentially, and my ability to be detected. And so, yeah, I always lean on like doing just what I have to do at the different stages, and not doing things I don't have to. And I think a lot of times, to your point, when we're doing some when we're doing engagements, there's a desire to have us set off alarms on purpose to like test. We want to know if we can detect this thing. Is usually um, what gets said, right? So hey, we want you to go set off these things that
Yeah.
should fire. Uh, when and maybe you can save those things till the end when you've already done stuff the right way, but it does affect the entire test, right? It kind of
Oh,
can give you a
definitely.
sense, yeah, it can give you a false sense of security maybe as well. If you're like,
I mean,
oh yeah,
it's an excellent stage for purple team testing. Again, if you want to have that kind of thing, run. Did you see? No. Tune. Run. Did you see?
right, 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 right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do think purple team is super valuable if it's done correctly with follow through.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a good point as well. So I guess circling back to the medical device stuff, um, I guess where are you kind of hoping to see improvement? I know we've talked about there's this issue of guidance versus rules and regulations. But as I'm thinking about this more, as you've given me all this additional context that I hadn't considered about the problem, uh, I feel like there's a lot more players involved than I was thinking about. I was just thinking like device manufacturers and maybe like the FDA, but obviously hospitals and their IT staff, and maybe they have cybersecurity staff, and all there's a lot of different players involved here. So, um, you know, where are you hoping to see this push to improvement? Does it need to come from the FDA to force the issue? Um, or do we need to see
Well,
more attention from these some of these other players? What do you think?
well, again, I think it's going to get bubbled up because of what these devices are. When you do a release for like a medical device flaw or something like this, again, a lot of times it gets pushed through CISA. So again, that's critical infrastructure. So you have to think again, these are critical items. They're not like onesie and twosie things. Again, I think that CISA understands the risk involved with this, and again, implementing obviously some vulnerable thing maybe across like a 10,000 space may inherently increase that risk. Also, again, um, they also understand the sensitivity of these things and kind of like who's looking at exploiting these things. So I would like to see more, and I don't even know if it's regulation, but I think that the players involved need to kind of have an understanding of what is coming next. We're all to say that we live in a peaceful time is a fool's errand. We're not in a peaceful time. There's things going on across the world that are, events. There's ransomware going on all through the healthcare industry. A lot of times critical patient records are getting disclosed and getting lost due to various things, ransomware getting disclosed on breach forums, things like that. And in the end, something probably will happen. Now, what that is, I don't know, but necessarily it's not going to be good. So the sooner that we understand this and start correcting these things, either through legislation or other, the better it would be. I would hope the manufacturers themselves would take it upon themselves to, understand these primitives and know what they're making and placing into the environments. Again, a networked environment. But I don't kind of see that happening because they have a lot of people to answer to, quote unquote. Shareholders, you know, uh,
Yeah,
higher ups,
security
things
is a
like that.
cost center always.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
like, they make billions and billions of dollars, selling these things, and to stymie, production would be quote unquote bad for them. But I think that again, it's going to have to, it's going to be a few things. One, it's going to be I don't want to say the workforce has to get a little bit better with regards to the development practices that they follow. Some of the companies I have worked with and I have worked for, they actually had good development practices. It actually kind of closely followed Navy RMF, and that you had security personnel when you first designed an item, and then as it went through the various checkpoints, you would have like a test that, like as it's a widget, it's in the primitives. We're developing this thing. Here's a proof of concept. Test it. See what you can do. And then if it's fine, you send it up and it gets developed. And if it's not, you just go back and redevelop the things you need to, and then you go through, put it through as another check. So
Sure.
adherence to things like that would actually help. So the development process kind of needs to get corrected in some of these places. And also, I would hope that if they are going to leverage AI for coding, it's done in a responsible manner, in that the person behind the keyboard actually understands the primitives of what they're doing. I've been in situations where they've hard coded bad vulnerabilities into their systems just because the developer did not understand the AI primitives that were being used during the code.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That yeah, I don't know. It's I've heard a lot, and I do think it's going to be a real problem about AI, AI generative AI introducing vulnerabilities into software that it's being used to create, right? Um, my original take on that was, I said, "Hey, let's calm down. Humans are doing just we're doing just fine introducing vulnerabilities into our
Oh yeah.
code already." but um but at the same time, even though that is true, we're very good at it ourselves. At the same time, I do think what you brought up is I've kind of changed my stance on it because I think very quickly we're already getting there, but it's going to become more dramatic that there's going to be a lot of people involved in developing applications and software who don't have a lot of understanding of the code that they're producing with AI. That that is going to be a problem, right? And so, yeah, I think that hopefully, ideally, you would have someone who has a deep understanding of coding and secure coding practices who would do like a final review of
Exactly, and that's the thing is that you
testing.
actually have
But
to have a tester to test it.
yeah, yeah, you have to, yeah, I would hope ideally you'd have a very, a distinguished programmer or whatever, somebody who understands secure coding practices as well, do a source code review, and then you still have it tested. Um, but again, that's that cost center, and I could see people cranking out software, AI generated, a lot of it, without doing that. So I do think that's going to be an issue. Um, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's going to be a problem across all software, right? I'm expecting in the next few years, just finding all kinds of vulnerabilities that you're like, why would someone do this? And it's, you know, AI generated code that somebody didn't understand the implications of it. So yeah, that I could definitely see that. So you said some of these companies like do better than others. Um, do any of these manufacturers have bug bounty programs at all?
Not that I've seen. The only thing I've seen is possible lawsuits.
Mm. So you mean lawsuits like targeting researchers or the company being sued for their product?
I as part of my interactions with that and the talk, I d- they didn't outright say that a lawsuit was pending, but I felt that the next thing out of their mouth was going to be, you need to talk to like somebody like like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because again they feel that you're dealing with proprietary data and things like this, like but again I don't care about their binaries, I'm just trying to find the flaws in them. So
Right.
uh I've not seen any bug bounties. I would like to see investment in this, but again, the issue is that where do you get these medical devices from? I mean, mind you, eBay has a lot for sale that really shouldn't. But other than that, it's just the consumer market.
Ah, I see. So it'd be difficult potentially to do bug bounty because you'd like have to provide devices or something. It seems like.
Exactly. I mean, these things are not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough because on the one hand, bug bounty tends to provide like a really good return on investment if you're making software or a product. Generally, it's a pretty good deal for
Exactly.
for you. So, in a situation where they are averse to a cost center, that would be a really good way to make some improvements, I think. But
You would think so.
yeah, I don't know what you do about access to devices for the maybe a private program. I still don't know necessarily how you'd provide access to devices, but
That's the problem.
yeah. But I could see though, I mean,
But that's again why they bring them to DEF CON.
oh, so they do bring some
Yes.
manufacturers bring devices to DEF CON
Yeah,
to
that's where
have them tested.
primarily yes, that's where primarily a lot of my releases come from because again, I can't release things for my clients that I do testing for work. So
Right.
again, I need to see, what's out there, and then it gives you various flavors of devices that are being manufactured. But yeah, they'll bring them to DEF CON again, and if you find a flaw at the biohacking village, you can release it with the company. If I mean, I would say if they have a policy to release vulnerabilities, but some of these companies are so backward that like one instance I'm waiting 3+ years and it still has not come out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've run into that with certain not medical device providers, but let's say cloud content
Oh
providers.
yes.
That was a similar issue because and I think they just changed it actually, but for the longest time you could not submit a CVE for anything cloud. They were you couldn't do it. And they had this reasoning, and I have an email from when I tried, I wasn't aware that you couldn't get CVEs for cloud stuff, and I had a few that I thought were really critical and problematic, and they weren't getting attention with the vendor. And so I wanted to submit a CVE and kind of force the issue, by publishing it. And I think it was MITRE, maybe or CISA, whoever issues the CVEs. They said you can't do it. They sent me this whole long email about their policy and why they don't and everything. And I was like, okay, it makes sense, kind of, but that leaves me no real avenue to like hold this company accountable at all, right? Like, there's no real good publishing avenue here. And I think they just changed it. I want to say I saw something like last week that they're now accepting CVEs for cloud
Yeah,
platforms,
that's good.
which is good. Yeah, I mean, it should have always been happening. I don't. There was. It would have been different if there was like a separate avenue, right? If it's like, well, we're not going to issue CVEs, but we're going to issue this other thing that's cloud specific. I would have been like, okay, fine. But to have nothing as an
Yeah.
alternative was unfortunate. So I think that just changed. But yeah, of course, I've run into that as well, with companies. Just, I mean, we hear about it all the time, with like big name companies that
Oh
usually
yeah.
do a good
Oh,
job, but
they make a lot of money. Yeah.
for some reason, certain things just linger for years. Um, I had a few more things that I wanted to ask you about, and one of these we already kind of touched on. We were talking a little bit about the existence of bug bounty programs, how some of this stuff gets reported, and kind of the reaction to it. But I wanted to ask specifically about responsible disclosure because, you know, it's been kind of become a precedent or a standard that within the infosec space, hacking, uh, when we talk about issues where maybe it's taking a vendor a long time to address something, maybe they've ceased communication, or maybe it presents a unique risk to people and there's a responsibility to kind of make consumers aware. And there's usually like a certain, like a kind of a set timeline on that, and that's what we kind of refer to as responsible disclosure. So do you run into that with these medical devices? Where is there like a 90-day window, a longer one? Do you ever run into that where you kind of have to make a decision like, I think I'm going to disclose this because it's taking so long?
It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, no, there is supposed to be a timeline. Again, normally vendors will take it upon themselves to have a responsible disclosure policy. Again, this
Yeah.
is this kind of framework you have when you start up the business in order to live in this day and age. Now, normally they will go by the 90-day policy, and again, most of them will put themselves to adhere to this. But again, you'll find the oddities where they don't have a responsibility disclosure policy and they don't know what to do. Other
Mm.
times, again, everybody in the roles is fairly new in their roles and they also don't know how to do these things or how to necessarily carry these things out. So that's when you come into the issues of timing. Um, Sadly, I've been working with one particular vendor to try to release something for about 3 years. There was a time
Wow.
period where necessarily we did not have communication and emails were going unanswered. Luckily, that has restarted, but again, the timeline of things is difficult. Now, I get the issue because again, the criticality of the bug located could, be difficult for the device to reorganize some things. But necessarily, again, the issue comes about that responsible disclosure means that the company is taking about the disclosure process responsibly. They are trying to, again, step with the right foot forward and lead by example, not by being made an example.
Yeah.
Now, again, yeah, and see, that's the problem is that, like, I'm not going to necessarily make this company an example, but again, the they should try to be the example and
Yeah.
lead in this space by, providing the backbone and the ability to respond to these things, in a timely manner. And I guess the worst part is that the testing was done for free. It's again one of these things where they bring it to the biohacking village, and we do our workflow on them, and these were located taking the time out of the conference to do these things because this is one of the only forums where we can actually get access to these devices to actually test them, similar to the voting machines that are going to be at DefCon that I can't wait to try as well. um, it's this kind of forum to where you would actually get access to these devices to test them. So it's like, well, we're taking the time to go to a conference to also, like, educate, but participating in these kinds of endeavors and doing the testing for them for free, um, they should be able to disclose their own vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe that'll improve over time too, as far as the ones participating in the biohacking village. I know that the first time that I participated in the AI CTF at DEF CON in the AI village, it was a similar thing where they got Google and some other big um, big organizations who have like frontier models build their own models to provide access to them for the purposes of testing at DEF CON. And the first time, there wasn't a lot of follow up, right? Like I submitted a whole bunch of issues that I, mostly of most of them I think were verified to, and then I heard nothing. And I saw this year that they were talking about, I believe they're actually going to let people earn bounties as part of bringing those models to DEF CON to be tested this time. So it would be cool if there was some better feedback, in terms of if they're going to do that, if they're going to bring stuff to DEF CON to have it tested, they're getting it tested for free. They're getting free bugs. If they're not, it'd be nice if there was at least follow up. So hopefully that'll improve. And
Yeah,
then go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I have faith.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you're somewhat optimistic about it. I mean, yeah, we've watched this happen across a bunch of other spaces, right? So that's why I am optimistic it'll head in the right direction, but it can be difficult getting there. And on that same note, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the issue with making all these devices suddenly smart devices. That suddenly everything has Wi-Fi or some kind of interconnectivity and enhanced capabilities that increase the attack surface or its ability or increase the impact if it's like networked now. So one of the things I wanted to ask about, because we see that the trend right now with AI, large language models specifically, is there's this push to shove it into everything, right? Shove it into operating systems at the OS level, shove it into phones at the OS level, shove it into websites of all types as like chatbots. And so I just kind of assume, I guess, that there'll, anywhere that they can push this stuff, it's going to get shoved. And I can imagine a lot of people coming up with use cases for AI in these medical devices. Uh, I mean, how do you feel about that? Because we're already in a place, right, with AI where, like, you compared this space to AI earlier with kind of the lack of or the immaturity of the security posture and the security model. Now we're going to be probably combining those. So What are your thoughts on that as we're like shoving AI into all this stuff?
Well, again, it's kind of a weird thing, and I'm glad you mentioned the networking piece. Again, a lot of manufacturers, when I speak to them about their devices, um, the boards they use, sometimes they don't necessarily know all the functionality of. Sometimes I've encountered projects where I ask developers about this particular choice in board and why they're using something with Wi-Fi, and they said it just came as part of the board, and they didn't disable it. Other times, again, you can enable it depending on what kind of access you have to the device, and enabling it would allow a backdoor. So the other thing is sometimes these devices they are built on platforms that have an Ethernet port. Again, computing devices normally these days have an Ethernet port or some kind of networking capabilities. So what I've noticed is in the use cases in the device, sometimes it will say this device is not meant to be plugged in, but it has full networking capabilities and is located in a place where people plug stuff in. System administrators like to plug stuff
Interesting.
in. They
Yeah.
also like to update their devices and know physically where it is and what it's doing. So that would be, again, installing secondary software on that. Another reason to plug the device in. So it goes against sometimes the use cases of these devices when people actually get them into the field, which again incorporates more vulnerabilities and more risk. But with regards to putting AI in these systems, it's all kind of dependent on what it does and how it does it, and if it does it tactfully. Again, if you think of how simple AI and also how some things work with regards to AI in software, it's just a binary tree. It's literally if this then that, and then if not then else, and then does something else, and then it does something else continuously until it finishes its routine. Now, I would hope that the AI that they utilize again would be much more functional and much more well developed than currently what we're using. And again, this would be something that would be used obviously to save lives. Now, again, with the Google AI, if you remember that one when that was released and people were asking Google, hey, how do I have a small child? And it's like, oh, yeah, smoke a bunch of cigarettes before you have birth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it's things like this, obviously, that kind of increase risk when you're putting this in a medical device that may be incorporated into saving a life. I would say have it do kind of dumb down things, automation of tasks, things like that. But the AI, again, it's going to be one of those things to where when they do utilize it, it's going to have to be in a monitored place, and it's going to have a lot of brains on it because, again, I can't see in the current state of AI putting this thing in charge of saving a life currently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of where I end up on the topic of AI use cases in general, I guess. Okay, so last thing I want to ask you about was how can someone get started in medical device hacking? Say they have never thought about it. They see this, they hear about you, what you're doing, besides your sold out workshop, and probably the long line that will be at the biohacking village for your talk. What are some other ways that somebody can get involved in this? Are there any resources? Obviously, you brought up the kind of CTF at DefCon. Is there anything else like that that people can get involved with if they're interested in this space?
I would say the biohacking CTF and the device lab and testing the devices is kind of where the bread and butter of this is at. The issue is getting your hands on these devices. Though, again, there are a lot of consumer devices that you can buy over the counter. And again, you can analyze them at home yourself. It's just like taking apart something, obviously, and, doing it for obviously a client, but it's just investigations for yourself. There are some projects or some, what is it, those blood sugar things that run on Bluetooth that you can communicate with your
Oh
phone.
yeah.
hmm There's also a Cardia, what is it, EKG monitor that is,
Mm.
is over the counter that you can buy off Amazon. It's like $20. Interestingly enough, I was kind of looking at this last night. The item records in high frequency, so it doesn't use Bluetooth to communicate with your phone. It actually sends a high frequency pitch to your phone to aggregate the heartbeat and what you're having as far as a heart event. Now,
Wow.
my theory is, you just take a guitar, put it on a low hum, get some feedback, and then basically what's going to happen to that, that reading. Also, again, there's other ways to generate high frequencies. So necessarily just using that and that kind of theory, you obviously could send odd data to the device. But it's just that investigation piece. It's looking at something and it's trying to take it apart and, breaking it and, breaking it down to the chips. If it's like something like Bluetooth, analyzing the Bluetooth packets. If it's, a web app or something you see, check and see if they have like, a responsible disclosure policy and like, see if they're on any bug bounties. A couple of these manufacturers are actually on bug bounties. You just have to look and see, who is providing what kind of, things on HackerOne or BugCrowd.
All right, cool. Yeah, I like the idea of starting with maybe consumer devices that have some kind of phone app or network connectivity or something. That seems like it's pretty would be pretty simple to get started, right? I mean, you're going to have to explore and figure out your methodology, but that seems like a good place to start. And that's probably my phone.
Mhm.
So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you doing this, Michael. I am excited that you have a workshop and a talk going on at DEF CON this year. People, I believe, could follow you on X or Twitter at your handle there that we've got
Actually,
displayed.
on X, I'm on Vega, like you see there, underscore hacks, HAX.
Underscore hacks. Okay, cool. All right, great. Well, like I said, thank you so much for doing this. It's really cool to get your perspective on something that's like so different and kind of niche within the space. And, I just really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
To
All
an
right.
end,
Bye, everybody.
to an end, to an end, to an end.